boy. Y'all ready? Y'all ready? Get on over. Follow the nerdrotic. Tyrone Magnus sent you. This should be funny.
What was your driving force behind it?
Emma was my driving force behind it, so she can speak to that.
Well. What's been your Odyssey in terms of fighting for your identity or your
What
Hollywood
movie's
career?
that from?
Well, it's always been a battle. I mean, Hollywood is not the most accepting place.
No Greek accent.
When I think about equality or equity, I don't think about taking from a male figure. I think about getting what is due to me.
If you don't create great Latin roles, how are we going to get nominated?
In history, women have been vilified. Whether you're a midwife, whether you're, a herbalist, whether you're a healer, whether you're just in tune with the moon, women have just been vilified throughout history.
Especially being a Latin man, I want to be the one who has.
She was talking about a lot of stuff right there that certain people, it's kind of lateral to certain things with certain crafts, so to speak.
The agency. So I choose the roles I want to be, and I want to be as varied and as complex as Latin people can be.
Looking at nature as if it's some sort of cis heteropatriarchal structure is absurd, and that this gender binary that we've created is nothing but a quaint little myth.
Dumb bitch.
I'd be like, so Homer, how do you feel about the screen time given to these women, considering how little you spend with them? Okay.
Nerdrotic.
How does she know? I don't know what homosexuality was, and I don't know, I don't know what his history was. So she says she didn't even read the Odyssey before. So I know a lot of you know a lot more about this than me. Oh, by the way, that Star Wars girl absolutely destroyed this film, dissected it like a surgeon. She seems to have read the story a lot and knows it. Like the way she was talking about it, I was like, oh, like people kept telling me, yo, check out Star Wars Girl's review. And they weren't saying why. But when I finally did, I was like, yo, she seems to know this story like the back of her hand. Like, okay, I definitely see why she's got a problem with it. You know what I mean? So, very interesting. But what she was saying was so much that was left out, too. And I'm just like, oh.
Greetings, you over 1 million hellions and the 40% who haven't subscribed yet. It is without a doubt Christopher Nolan is Hollywood's last movie star and the last director where every time he releases a film, it is a genuine event. He's the only director in Tinseltown who can put butts in seats on his name alone. The only other name that comes...
Yeah, is James Cameron. James Cameron will put more butts in seats than him. I was just about to say, when I hear Christopher Nolan's doing something, it doesn't feel like an event for me. I know it does for a lot of other people, and I understand why a lot of people like him, but it's kind of hit or miss with me. I'm just noticing. I was kind of thinking of the movies of his that I have seen, and I'm like, he's definitely an acquired taste, but it's worked. You know what I mean? I can't say it hasn't worked. So, but James Cameron, he him on his name. If you tell me James Cameron's doing something, my antenna go up. Because I know he doesn't miss. He doesn't miss more than Nolan doesn't miss. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah.
Close as old Jimmy Cameron, and he's only made 3 movies in the last 17 years about...
Oh, by the way, too, people were asking me about, was it better than Project Hail Mary? Listen, Project Hail Mary blows the Odyssey out the effing water to me, okay? Out of the water. I'm talking about a supercharged, elegant, anime style Kamehameha with the voice echoing May Ha May Ha Like, there's no comparison. There is no comparison to me. To me. That's my opinion. You may absolutely love this, and this is a totally false. By Jove! You know what I mean? That's great. I'll never down you for liking this movie. So that's one thing I'm not going to do. I'm not going to attack you for liking the movie. If you liked it, you liked it. I didn't. I was bored.
Indigenous blue furry space people that are practicing misanthropy while they do make a lot of money, I think they're awful. Simply put, Christopher Nolan is the king of Hollywood. Yet it's been quite an odyssey to get to his latest film, The Odyssey, one that was unexpected. When it was announced in December of 2024, I would argue it was met with overwhelming excitement. Certainly there were some questions, even from his biggest fans, about Christopher Nolan taking this big swing and adapting something that is the foundation of all of Western civilization storytelling. A mythological tale that's essentially epic fantasy, which could be perceived as out of his wheelhouse, but those were far and few between, and quite frankly, normal questions and nothing you would consider controversial until a month later when the casting was announced. And when it was originally announced, nobody really knew who was playing who, but in particular, Travis Scott, Zendaya, Lupita Nyong'o, and Elliot Page. Raised more than a few eyebrows, but didn't hurt the excitement for the film, considering 70mm screens sold out a year in advance. All was quiet for a while until the red flags went up when we found out who was playing who, including Zendaya playing Athena, and Lupita Nyong'o playing Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships. But the most controversial casting of them all is Elliot.
Was that a joke?
Was rumored to play Achilles, which ended up not being true. Page ended up being cast as Sinon, a character who wasn't even in the Iliad or the Odyssey. As bad as that was, what made things worse was the perceived association Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey had with Emily Wilson's feminist translation of Homer's work. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our brothers and sisters who are history enthusiasts who were pointing out the inaccuracy of the armor and, I don't know, the Viking ship that apparently identifies as a Greek ship. And then there's the overall Hollywood hypocrisy of an industry that is absolutely obsessed with identity, yet they ignored the identity of the country of origin of Homer's poem.
It's very
Greece.
interesting.
Hypocrisy that was best exemplified in two separate posts from Variety on X, the first one of which Moana creatives on working closely to honor Polynesian culture and traditions and why representation matters. Yet it appears that Variety completely forgot that just a month earlier, when people were genuinely asking why doesn't representation matter in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, they clap back with, these are just trolls who have a silly and wildly inaccurate argument. And just like that, The Odyssey dived headfirst into the culture war. There were criticisms from many, including Elon Musk, and the unthinkable happened. A Christopher Nolan film was ratioed on YouTube, leading many to believe that this film would be a flop based on everything they've seen from Hollywood over the...
I am hearing, I would have to take a look at it, but I'm hearing that people are saying there's something very fishy about Rotten Tomatoes right now. And this wouldn't be the first time that something's been very fishy with Rotten Tomatoes, with a controversial movie that checks all the boxes for a Hollywood Oscar or DEI or whatever you want to call it. So I'll have to look into that, but very interesting.
Last 10 years.
Oh, no, my movie theater, because I'm thinking of the different questions that people had. No, my movie theater wasn't full. No one clapped. Some of you think it's weird that people clap at movies. Yeah, people clap all the time when something cool happens. At least over here in America where I live, when something cool happens, I've gotten claps going several times in different movies. I've clapped at the end of movies. The first movie I ever clapped at the end of was Independence Day. I was like a teenager when that came out, and I remember I went to go see that, and I clapped at the end along with the rest of the crowd. So, yeah.
Eventually, the corporate critics and influencers were allowed to see the film, and unsurprisingly, the corporate critics and influencers overwhelmingly love it. And once again, I'm going to have to differ with the corporate critics and maybe most of humanity, because I was overwhelmingly whelmed with The Odyssey. I wish I could tell you that the questionable casting, considering how little they were in the film, didn't affect my suspension of disbelief or the...
Yeah, it's one of those things with the casting. Like I said, what was really weird is they pushed them to the forefront when they weren't even in the movie that long. The characters that you're really going to be paying attention the most to is Tom Holland's character and Odysseus, of course. John Leguizamo's in there a lot. I thought he did a good job. Whether he's controversial or not for his takes, I thought he did a good job with his character. But overall, the movie was just a pain, extremely boring to watch. I don't mind a slow burn movie. I've loved movies that were slow and methodical. I have no problem with that. The problem is it was boring. Okay. However the story was told, whatever you want to call it, pacing, it was just boring. So, I had drank some coffee before I went, so I didn't go to sleep, so I was good to go.
Red flags from that questionable casting weren't a sign of a story that will deconstruct the hero, or this film wasn't a...
That's what I wanted to say. Whether they were in it or not, it wouldn't have mattered. The movie still would have been boring. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're really, they don't matter. It's more of an eye roll moment. You know why they're doing it. It's like, okay, they check the boxes. This is a DEI movie, a modern audience movie, a woke movie. Christopher Nolan said it himself. It's for modern audiences. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he signed up for. He knows what he directed. So, but it doesn't matter. Just overall, you could have switched those characters out with anyone else, and it still wouldn't have mattered. It'd have been boring.
Affected by modernity and influenced by Emily Wilson's translation. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is a mythological tale that has been grounded into dirt, and it turns out a lot of people's concerns were completely justified. I would call it bullet point plot. Now, maybe this is just me, but I was expecting a grand sweeping adventure that would be immersive and, hey, a little fun, because Nolan is capable of that, all while being thoughtful. What I ended up seeing was a 3-hour drama that felt both rushed and too long at the same time. And while there were some good scenes that we will get to, they are far and few between and mostly surrounded by exposition dumps of people saying really obvious things. And as far as the immersion goes, well, this mythological tale that is set at a specific time in a specific region feels very modern. And instead of an adventure, you get a slow plotting drama that is a study in loss, regret, and PTSD. Which is...
People were asking me about Agamemnon. Agamemnon, they made him kind of like they made him like a Terminator. Like, he didn't do anything, but he would walk in, you know what I'm saying? They made him like this beacon of power when he walked in, but he didn't really do anything. But
a bit of a surprise considering the editing for this film, because Chris Nolan has taken his trademark nonlinear storytelling.
And here's another thing. People kept complaining about the sound. It makes me wonder if the people that complained about the sound went to see the IMAX version. Because I know IMAX has better picture and sound, and maybe that affected it. When I was in the movie, I didn't have a problem hearing or understanding anyone. There was one scene, and I think that was the fight in Troy, where it did hurt my ears. I was like, damn. I was like, what the hell? But that was it. It was only for a minor part of that, too. So it makes me wonder if it depends on the theater you went to see it in. I know if you go see certain things in RPX hits. Like in a Regal theater, it hits. So that could be it, too. It could be depending on I saw it standard. Standard movie theater. Screen at 2:00. That's what I saw. Okay?
And dialed it up to 11. The film opens up with Travis Scott's The Bard doing some slam poetry recounting the fall of Troy.
His part didn't work.
Immediately into our first flashback where Elliot Page's Sinan is waddling across a beach and then getting killed in front of the Trojan horse. And no, Elliot Page's Sinan isn't just some pity casting insignificant cameo.
Nope. Oh, by the way, I saw you and Drinker on Pierce. Yeah. Pierce, right? Can't remember his last name. Good job, both of you. The rapper, man, he was just, hickory dickory dock. The mouse ran up the clock. That's what he kept doing. I was just like, I'm like, this is, I would expect, like I thought this was supposed to be, you expect it to be cool. You know what I mean? 3 blind mice. I was just like, huh? Okay, whatever. They could have given that part to somebody else. You know, I don't like that sometimes when I see certain people float. Like, it's always like a rapper. It's always like a rapper or a singer or something, and you'll see them in a part that they could have given to an actor. You know what I'm saying? That could have did much better. It's that type of situation when you see that. You see Travis Scott.
Serves as a bookend to the story of sorts, since it wouldn't be possible for me to recount even a basic plot synopsis in the order that Christopher Nolan told it, which would take at the very least a spreadsheet and at most 1,000 yards of yarn and pushpins. I'll try to keep this as linear as possible because I'm not kidding. We have multiple perspectives recounting stories where we get flashbacks within the recounted stories. Yeah. I am aware this is how Odysseus recounts his journey in the poem. I'm also aware that this is a technique that has worked very well for Nolan in the past, but it doesn't work very well here. And apologies for any possible spoilers for an almost 3,000-year-old story. Odysseus, played by Matt Damon, is stranded on an island and tripping balls on the lotus flower with the mysterious nymph Calypso, played by a 60-year-old woman with plastic surgery. And unless you read Homer's Odyssey, Calypso will remain a mystery because they give absolutely no characterization or background on her. No. She's just a woman on an island. Nothing. While Odysseus struggles to remember his past, most of his kingdom of Ithaca believe him to be dead, and a gaggle of suitors led by Robert Pattinson's Antinous have invaded his palace and are drinking him out of house and home while trying to court his wife Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway. She has been
I thought that was very strange that there was that many men trying to get her, and they were staying there and eating and running their mouth and acting a damn fool. Like, you allowed people to do that then? I hope that that's part of the fantastical part of the mythology. Hope stuff like that did not happen back then. You know what I'm saying?
Following them for years and trying to protect her son Telemachus, played by Tom Holland, whose life is constantly in danger. And the only people in the kingdom that really believe Odysseus is still alive is Penelope, Telemachus, the swineherder Aeneas, played by the Colombian John Leguizamo, and Odysseus's dog Argo.
That's another thing. When I was doing another video, so I was like, yeah, you know, John Leguizamo's Puerto Rican. And you know what's funny to me? He never looked Puerto Rican to me. So I discovered John Leguizamo back when I was like a teenager. He had a comedy special that uses a derogatory term towards Spanish people. Orama. That's what it was called. And he played several different characters in that. Some guys, some girls, kids. He played different characters in it. I didn't think it was that funny. There was a couple of things I thought was funny, but I had a Puerto Rican friend who was watching it with me. Oh, he was having the time of his life. He was like, yo, like all these different characters that he's doing. Like I know people like this, right? So people were telling me like, nah, he's Colombian. He grew up in a Puerto Rican part of the city. And he thought he was Puerto Rican for a while. But then he found out that he actually wasn't, or something like that. Like, so that's the whole thing with him. I always thought he's Puerto Rican. I'm like, well, he said he's Puerto Rican. I guess he's Puerto Rican, you know. Like, why is he gonna lie about that? But then someone else, that other dude, right, that got where Joe Rogan rolled up on him on stage. I forgot his name, but he was supposed to be saying he was Mexican, but he wasn't, right? Wasn't he like, I don't know, Peruvian or something? Y'all know who I'm talking about, the comedian. Interesting.
Meanwhile, back on the island of Ogygia with Calypso, played by Charlize Theron, Odysseus, played by Matt Damon, starts to slowly recall his past after the 10-year war that led to the fall of Troy. Now, the Trojan horse and the sack of Troy loom like a shadow over the story and Odysseus. That's why Nolan made the decision to spread it throughout the film. And I was mostly okay with this until you get to the end and learn that it looms like a shadow over the film, because it's all about how it's interpreted, and we'll get to that. But after the sack, as Agamemnon makes his way home, Odysseus takes a slower route where he occasionally runs into Athena, played by Zendaya, and I have to point out, unlike Lupita Nyong'o playing Clytemnestra and Helen of Troy, Elliot Page playing Sinon, and this guy playing H-1B Greek, credit where credit is due, within the story they do explain why Athena looks like this, and that's another thing we'll get to in just a bit. Now, before we get to one of my favorite parts of the movie, I want to give you my favorite scene when these two guys announce themselves as Greek soldiers.
We're Greeks from Ithaca.
No, you're not. And here I was thinking there wasn't any levity in this film. But this brings us to the Odyssey portion of the Odyssey, which is the 10-year journey from Troy to Ithaca, which is about the middle third of the movie. And outside of the horrific casting, this is the biggest question I had for this movie.
Oh, for you people that want to know, if you don't want to know, close your ears. You know, like people thought it was like a battle cry for him to say, "Let's go!" Close your ears for 3 seconds. Ready? 1, 2, 3. They were actually retreating, running from the evil dead. That's why he said that. So, yeah. Wasn't a battle cry.
From the get-go, how will Christopher Nolan deal with gods and monsters? Since everybody's going to bring it up, I know how Troy handled them. They didn't. It was my criticism back then and remains my criticism today. As far as the Odyssey is concerned, they did a little more. The gods are either depicted as forces of nature or what could be interpreted as PTSD delusions, but there are monsters. Starting with the giant cyclops Polyphemus, which did look cool. This is exactly what I came to this movie to see. Unfortunately, despite the very impressive practical effects, it still felt a little flat. You
know what's weird to me? In here, the Cyclops comes in. This is another spoiler, but he's talking spoilers a little bit. The Cyclops comes in, and I thought it was so strange. Like, all the soldiers are in there. He brings his sheep in. Apparently, he makes cheese. So he brings his sheep in, and then he has a giant slab of rock that he uses to close the door. He grabs one of the men, chews his damn head off, eats some more of him, pieces of meat falling off, and goes to sleep. Like, with all the other men hollering and screaming right in front of him, he does nothing. Like, he just goes, I was like, wait, what? You know these men could kill you in your sleep, right? And you just... They have a line in there about that, about him not speaking to them. He said, well, would you speak to an ant or something like that? I don't know if that's quite the, these are clearly other creatures that can talk to you, like literally speak your language. Just bites head off and go to sleep with the rest of them right there.
There being no conversation between Odysseus and the Cyclops, and no use of the name Nobody and no other Cyclops. Just in case you're not familiar with the story, the Nobody thing is kind of important. So in the poem, Odysseus gets the Cyclops drunk. He asks Odysseus what's his name. He responds with Nobody. So when Odysseus is stabbing him in the eye and Polyphemus is crying out for the other Cyclops and they ask who is harming you, he responds with Nobody. Nolan said he tried to put it in, but it just wouldn't work. And again, it looked fantastic, and this
doesn't sound like that wouldn't work.
Supernatural monster scenes that Nolan actually spent time on, where by the end you actually feel sorry for the Cyclops, and I did like that bit. But this is where I started noticing a major ambition from Odysseus's character, because in the story he's kind of famous for being cheeky. Instead, we get a very somber and serious Odysseus in a very somber and serious film. But now Odysseus and his crew are cursed to wander the sea for years because they harmed the son of Poseidon. And their next stop is not the floating island of Aeolia. That was left out with a lot of other stuff. No, it's the Lystragonians, the land of bloodthirsty cannibal giants. Now, we didn't necessarily see them being cannibals, and they weren't necessarily giants, but they were big, and in steel-plated armor in the Bronze Age, but I don't have a problem with their look. It kind of reminds me of the lore of the remnants of a pre-Diluvian advanced civilization. I don't know if it was supposed to be funny, but it was, and it played out something like this. After that incredibly short scene, they're off to their encounter with Cersei, played by Samantha Morton, where it's been reported by some influencers and corporate critics that her performance was on the level of Heath Ledger's Joker.
No, it wasn't. That's why he just put that in there. I was like, no, I thought it was good. But no, it was not. No. But that's the most disturbing part of the movie, most people think. Yeah, and you'll know when it happens.
You serious?
While it was good, I would say pump the brakes on the overpraise. Now, every stop Odysseus and what's left of his crew makes is for provisions. This time, the crew is pissed off enough to tell Odysseus to stay back as they go up and talk to Cersei. And as they walk up to her house, they see a lot of docile predators like lions and cheetahs and discarded armor. Nothing suspicious there, and this leads into what is my favorite moment and scene in the film, at least in the beginning. Cersei feeds the crew, and they just start eating savagely, and then she eventually turns them all into pigs. It's both gruesome and cool.
The way they start eating is real, and some of them, it looked like what they did was they had them like fill their mouths with as much food as they could, and then kind of like pull it out of their mouths. Like it looked like it was running backwards. It was really, really strange looking with how they were eating. And as soon as she offers them some food, and I'm just like, wait a minute. Something's not going to go well here. See, and I didn't have to read the Odyssey in high school. I don't remember ever having to read that. I remember hearing about it. I remember hearing about the movie or whatever, but I don't remember having to read that. So there's a lot of this I don't know about. You know what I mean?
Is a genuine horror scene, and this is one of the few times in the film where the music actually fits. But as what happens a lot in the Odyssey, the resolution is a bit rushed. Of course, they were going to have Odysseus staying there for a year and banging Cersei. Instead, we get what I believe is one of the least subtle moments of leaning into the spirit of the Emily Wilson translation by making Cersei some sort of trauma survivor. Cersei holds a dagger to Odysseus's neck as she talks about the men's gluttony, toxicity,
that's where they're running away
for war, and in isolation, it would have been fine and matches what's in the poem, but you also have to consider that they radically changed the character of Cersei so they could really lean into what is a through line in the film. Toxic masculinity. You know, the good old misunderstood female antagonist. Odysseus apologizes for his men's toxic masculinity and gets directions to Hades, where Odysseus once again runs into the shade of Elliot Page's Sinon. And this is where it becomes very hard to argue that this was simply just a brief and insignificant cameo and pity casting, or stunt casting as some would call it. Despite the 5+ minutes of screen time, Elliot Page's Sinon turns out to be a significant character. Elliot Page's Sinon confronts Odysseus about lying to him about being left behind to present the Trojan horse, not knowing that the Greek soldiers were in it. Odysseus tells Sinon he needed him to believe the lie for the deception. Elliot Page's Sinon also informs Odysseus that when he took the place of Robert Pattinson's Antinous, his family was offered money, but they welched on the deal, framing Elliot Page's Sinon as a victim of both the protagonist and antagonist. So Christopher Nolan chose to take a character who wasn't even in the Iliad or the Odyssey, deliberately change their story because Sinon did know the Greek soldiers were in the Trojan horse in a completely different poem, and then cast Sinon as Elliot Page, making Sinon one of the few good, honorable men in this story, where Sinon is both a symbol of Odysseus's shame and part of his motivation to go home, to seek retribution against what is the leader of the suitors, Robert Pattinson's Antinous, if terrorizing his wife Penelope and son Telemachus wasn't enough. In other words, it's really hard to argue that this wasn't subversive casting meant to be provocative. One could argue Christopher Nolan is known for bringing back actors that he likes, and I would argue that both things can be true, because you'll have a hard time convincing me that Elliot Page was cast on their acting prowess in a scene that dominated their time in the underworld, taking away screen time from the book.
Yeah, whenever it's a controversial movie and they pick somebody, or TV show, and they pick somebody, and they're like, oh, they were the best for the job. That's a lie. It was the best for the job of pushing your propaganda. Yeah, that's true, but not the best for the job. There's thousands or more of actors across the entire planet. And you can't tell me that you chose this person that totally does not fit the character when you could have picked this person over here that definitely embodied it. You had an agenda. Like, don't, like, it's poppycock.
Brilliant James Remar's Tiresias, the Blind Prophet, and we didn't get to see Odysseus interact with the shades of Achilles, Ajax, his mother, all of whom I would have much rather seen than seeing Sinan whine about being lied to. Now, when I originally heard about this scene, I suspected that Sinan might be playing a proxy for the Shade of Achilles, but in truth, Sinan is playing a proxy for Elpenor, another male character that Elliot Page was rumored to play. Odysseus does encounter the Shade of Agamemnon, who informs him that he was killed upon his return by the now twin sister of Helen of Troy, Clytemnestra, due to the fact that he did sacrifice their daughter for some favorable winds. And Agamemnon...
Agamemnon had a nice setup when he got back. Welcome back as a king, a ruler. He got there, they set up everything for him, took the armor off, he had a bath, and then he got stabbed in the neck plate. So, but yeah, he had a nice setup there.
Agamemnon warns Odysseus to be careful upon his return home. And then almost...
I would say that was probably the best she looked in the movie, too. Because she was all dressed in this gown, ready to greet Agamemnon or whatever. Like, after, either during his bath or after. It was something like that. Well, both. She was there. I think she was there during the bath and after. Whatever. Y'all will know when you see it, if you go see it. That was the best she looked in the whole movie, I would say.
As if it's obligatory, Tiresias rattles off the rest of the prophecy, which is sailing past the sirens, essentially having to sacrifice 6 men to Scylla, the 6-headed monster, rather than losing all of his men to the whirlpool of Charybdis, and that the rest of them are going to die when they slaughter the cattle of the sun god Helios. And almost as if it's obligatory, that's pretty much how the scenes play out. You don't even see or hear the sirens, and when Odysseus insists on having himself tied to the mast, it's jarring because it's out of character for the Odysseus in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, who's never shown himself to be very cunning or curious. And instead of gaining insight like in the poem, instead, the song tells him of basically all his broken dreams. And the most important, and one could argue the most subversive thing, the song tells Odysseus that he doesn't really want to go home, which directly contradicts Odysseus' entire motivation in the original poem. The Charybdis and Scylla scene was a complete letdown, particularly with Scylla that looked awful, which I'm guessing might have had something to do with Christopher Nolan's aversion to CGI and his aversion to anything with imagination or wonder. Most, if not all of these scenes were treated with, well, I guess we have to do this, so I'll do my best and we'll get it over with as quick as we can. Which is exactly how it plays out when Odysseus' crew slaughters the cattle of the sun god Helios, and then they eventually die in a storm, and it all happens in about 10 minutes. And what's left out? The land of the lotus seed.
I tell you, some of these stories, similar to how certain things happen, like in the Bible, in that there will be a certain story that's told in a way to or teach a lesson or something. But like people will end up doing something that is totally moronic. And he told them not to eat the cattle, and then they snuck off and did it anyway. He told them the ramifications. Like, what? That wouldn't have been me. Like, people do the stupidest stuff in some of these mythologies.
There's the floating island of Aeolia, the Phaeacians and King Alcinous. Again, Calypso is just a lady with plastic surgery on a beach, with no mention of her being the daughter of Atlas. And on that note, there's no mention of Circe being the daughter of Helios, the sun god, and Perse, because there isn't any real gods in this story, and there's definitely no male gods. Now, they show the female deities while not really saying they're deities. We'll get to Zendaya's Athena in just a second. But as far as the male gods are concerned, there's no Hermes. Poseidon is presented as a raging ocean. Zeus is thunder and lightning. And Zendaya's Athena, who may or may not be a goddess, spends most of the film shaking her head or scowling at Odysseus when she isn't shaming him. This brings us to the suitors, which is a large portion of the film and the one I found the most redundant. Now, it will be an opportunity for the actors to really choose some scenery, but the only person who really pulled that off was Robert Pattinson. Aside from Elliot Page and the very brief appearance of Travis Scott, nobody was terrible. Robert Pattinson was the best, playing essentially a mustache-twirling villain with Antinous.
Yeah.
And surprisingly enough, I think John Leguizamo did a commendable job stealing a part from a Greek actor, playing Odysseus' pal and swineherder AMS. Tom Holland did a great job playing Tom Holland, and I particularly like the scene when Spider-Man went to Sparta.
Oh, man, listen, what is it with John Bernthal playing that one character all the time? And you know what? He's actually one of my favorite characters. But he played him like the Punisher. He played it. He has a way, like the same character he played in The Wolf of Wall Street, the same Shane in The Walking Dead. He plays that character. Like, he has a thing of where he doesn't look at you when he talks to you. Like, how come you're here, Red? You didn't tell me you were coming. And he's got that thing where he won't look at you. Like, he does that whole thing where he's got the 1,000-yard stare when he's talking. Like, he was the same thing in this. I thought, I actually was expecting him to play the character different, but he did.
The Punisher, who's married to Nakia from Black Panther. And yes, this is where we see Lupita Nyong'o playing Helen of Troy, who also plays her now twin sister.
But she's got a scar on her face, too. I didn't know she apparently got scarred. I'd never heard about that.
Mestra, and while she is barely in the film, it is worth mentioning this is 100% stunt casting. They depict her as disfigured, insinuating that Frank Castle beat his wife. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that John Bernthal plays a great John Bernthal in this. And in this scene where Telemachus travels to Sparta to learn about his father Odysseus, we get more context about the sack of Troy. Again, a tale that was spread throughout the film, but once we get to the actual reason for the sack of Troy, well, that's when things go downhill for me. For one, turns out it wasn't over Helen. They made that abundantly clear when she apologizes for all the wars being fought in her name. It was because Agamemnon needed an excuse to fight the Trojans over control of some trade routes. And again, probably due to Christopher Nolan's aversion to CGI, the actual sack of Troy, which should have been this really epic battle, wasn't. While I won't say it wasn't shot well, it had the scale of a mid-budget streaming show. And this has been pointed out by many, and I completely agree with them. This film didn't deserve an R rating, and I don't know why.
Oh, yes. Speaking of numbers, as far as many goes, so you know how many people came to my comments? It was like, hey, you're the only person saying you didn't like this. I'm like, would you watch one other review? There's several people that didn't like this.
It got it. There wasn't any real savagery in the battle. We didn't see any blood or guts. Outside of the Cyclops eating a dude, the Odyssey is pretty bloodless. But by the end of the sack of Troy, you see what this movie is. Now, certainly, it has a through line of toxic masculinity, and certainly it's got some questionable casting. But all of that could have been overcome with good storytelling.
Yeah.
This is a story of destroying the hero of Odysseus, and that hammers you over the face with Zendaya's Athena, because again, they explain why she is playing the role. Odysseus witnesses the beheading of a priestess of the temple of Athena, and it is Zendaya. So either Athena took her form, or more than likely, she is just a PTSD delusion of Odysseus. The very sad, somber, and unremarkable Odysseus played by
Matt Damon.
Jason Bourne makes it back in time to save his son Spider-Man from the suitors who were sent by Batman to kill him before he makes it back from Sparta. And as disguised as a beggar, Odysseus assesses the situation, and then we get that big daddy's coming home scene.
The part with the dog was really sad. I saw dudes wiping their eyes with that. That was really sad. It worked. That was a good emotional scene. You know what I'm saying?
I really thought they were going to bring it home here. Odysseus, still disguised as the beggar, has a chat with Penelope and discusses the breaking of Zeus's law, which is essentially the sacred code that dictates hosts must provide food, shelter, and safety to strangers, and how the Trojan horse and the sack of Troy was the ultimate violation of it, leading to the end of their civilization in a point where we get a particularly bad line of dialogue where Odysseus refers to the Bronze Age within the Bronze Age that comes off something like this.
What, we some kind of
Bronze Age. And then we get to the final battle scene where Penelope sets up the challenge with Odysseus's bow. He is able to string it and fire an arrow through the axis, and then commence to slaughter all the suitors. While I'm guessing it's pretty difficult to film one guy with a bow and an arrow taking on dozens of dudes and killing them, this is Christopher Nolan. I hold him to a higher standard, and this scene was just clumsy. But in the end, Jason Bourne kills Batman and avenges Kitty Pryde. Then he crowns his son.
I know what he means by that scene being clumsy, and I thought it was going to be cooler. I did. I loved when he strung it, and boom, I liked when he did that, and he shot through the axes and everything. I liked that. I liked when he took out a couple of dudes, but then it did get. I was like, oh wow, I thought this was going to be like a super badass climactic part, but it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. So whatever.
Spider-Man and goes into exile as he sails off to the west to the Undying Lands. And what you're left with is a 3-hour slog that, again, is a movie that feels rushed and long all at the same time. A bad adaptation that, if you leave all of that out, is still a very mid-film. One, in my humble opinion, is deeply subversive, which is surprising for Christopher Nolan. And there is little doubt that the Emily Wilson translation was highly influential on this, specifically with the omissions or changes from the source material and how they're framed. Now, I'll just name a few in no particular order off the top of my head. Helen of Troy being abused and used as an excuse for the cause of the Trojan War with no mention of Aphrodite. Circe not being portrayed as a fearsome, beautiful woman, but instead she is a survivor of trauma, and they omitted Odysseus staying with her and shagging for the better part of a year. The sirens were literally muted and not seen, and they omitted that they died because Odysseus survived listening to their song, and instead
I was like, that part was weird. Like, one dude jumped off the boat and swam toward them, and then that was like it. And I was like, oh, okay. All right.
Of Calypso being portrayed as the embodiment of seduction and entrapment, leading to unconsensual taking the skin boat to Tuna Town. She's just a lonely 60-year-old woman with plastic surgery on a beach. There was also the omission of the maidservants of the suitors who were executed by Telemachus. Athena either being a hallucination or a god that takes on the likeness of a woman killed in the sack of Troy. The only deities or goddesses being portrayed in the film were women, of course suspiciously leaving out Aphrodite.
Yeah, because when they behead the girl, at the same time they behead the statue. So I was kind of like, wait. I was like, okay, I think this is either meaning that she took the form of a girl, or beheading the priest was like, because they chopped down they took the head off the statues in a way of like destroying that temple, Like, I don't know.
But the worst crime of them all was how Christopher Nolan treated the character of Odysseus. That being said, while Emily Wilson's translation may have been an influence, ultimately, every decision in this film that's good or bad lays at the feet of Christopher Nolan. In other words, it's not like Christopher Nolan gets producer notes. Nobody tells this guy what to do, and that's why his worst crime was the treatment of Odysseus. Instead of being the intelligent, cunning, resourceful, arrogant, yet deeply flawed hero of the Trojan War, he's portrayed by
Matt Damon
as a sad, remorseful, not particularly intelligent or cunning, traumatized survivor of the Trojan War. And it's insinuated his actions have led to the end of the Bronze Age. And it's not like he's terrible in this, but his Odysseus just lacks aura. And so does Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. It was a very stark, dry, competently put together film with some beautiful shots and some horrible sound mixing, but only made worse by the awful soundtrack. Now, by no means is this bad as something like Supergirl to me, and despite what I think about this film, a lot of people are loving this movie, and it's become a cultural event. For me, it was grim and without feeling.
If I was going to have to watch either one, I'd rather watch Supergirl again, because I'll get through it faster. But it's better than Supergirl. But last Mitch.
Hell, When Argus died, I felt nothing. Now, as a dog owner, how can you feel nothing when a dog dies? The ADD editing didn't allow anything to really sit. I couldn't get engaged with the characters. Now, this has worked for Nolan in the past, but it doesn't work here. It felt like I was watching a 3-hour sizzle reel, and for me, the verisimilitude was shot by, of course, the casting, the modernity, the modern vernacular, and the general look. I hated the color palette. Everything looked pretty drab. And as our good friend Metatron pointed out, in ancient Greece, the structures weren't ruins, they were actually new and colorful. And I don't know how the Greek army had a hard time getting over these walls of Troy. And the Trojan armor looked like something out of Rings of Power. And while I've said this is essentially fantasy based on mythology, that mythology has the backdrop of real events in real places like Troy. Now that I've seen it twice, I can confidently say, in my humble opinion, that Christopher Nolan was the wrong guy for this story. It is not Homer's Odyssey, it is Christopher Nolan's Odyssey. And I think we found Christopher Nolan's Achilles heel. This is very somber, analytical, and serious film, and I believe to take on genre like this, you need heart, imagination, and a sense of wonder. And would it kill you to have a little fun? I'm going to be real. I would rather watch an Odyssey directed by Michael Bay, and I completely understand. I'm going to be in the minority on this one because...
Yeah, the funny thing, I was just thinking the other day, I'd rather, and I don't think all Michael Bay's movies are bad. I'm actually a fan of Michael Bay. I like a lot of his movies. But I'd rather watch a bad, entertaining movie than a boring, technically sound movie any day. You know what I'm saying? But, what some people find boring is actually exciting to other people. You know what I'm saying? So it just goes for what you like. You know what I mean? But I'd rather be entertained any day than bored. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather be entertained by trash than bored by quality. You know what I'm saying? Certain things that you ever watch some of those shows about the rich and famous, lifestyles of the rich and famous? There's certain things that rich people will do, certain restaurants they will go to, certain shows they'll go to, certain things they'll eat or whatever. And you're just like, this is considered quality? And you paid how much? And you did this for this long? Okay. That's what I'm talking about. Some people are talking about this like that. I don't know. It's almost like Christ Jesus made this film. It's just, And if they feel that way, that's great. But I just... everyone's got different taste. And I can actually respect that. I just... when the Batman came out, people said that was boring. It was too slow. That was fine for me. I loved the Batman. There's a slow, methodical that works for me. And clearly there's a slow, methodical that doesn't work for me. And it's not like the Batman had a ton of action in it either. So... just to each their own.
Of the power of Nolan. This is nowhere near the worst film ever made, and it's nowhere near a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. And if you enjoy it, you go right ahead. I look forward to never seeing it again. And ultimately, if I had to describe Christopher Nolan's Odyssey in one sentence, it plays out like an atheist adapting the Bible.
nerdrotic.com.
If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, I don't know what happened. It stopped recording. I don't know what happened, but yeah. So, yep. Get on over to the Nerdrotic and subscribe. Tell them Tyrone Magnus sent you. If you enjoyed this reaction and commentary, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and share. 10 million subscribers.